Okay, so we have developed a beautiful collection and developed some spot graphics to go with it. And this next little section is kind of about like tying it up with a pretty little bow. So I like to add a collection name to all of my collections, and basically something that kind of describes the feeling of the collection. Almost like adding a bit of a brand to your collection. And I also like to add a story or a blurb that helps explain it. And usually how I'll do this is I'll kind of just take a look at the whole collection, pull it into Illustrator in some kind of, like just into an art space here, and kind of look at everything and see how everything's working together. And feel free to kind of, now that you see everything, the big picture, see everything all together, feel free to make any kind of like adjustments to get everything working as a group. So in this case, for instance, I think that pattern is far too large to go with the group and it's kind of stealing the show a little, so we're going to reduce that. And maybe we're going to make this one a little bit bigger because it is the kind of hero pattern of the group. Those of you who took my first class will recognize a familiar pattern. I integrated this print here as a secondary print because I thought it really fit the mood of what I was developing. So yeah, just kind of make any tweaks, any final tweaks that you think would be helpful. And I added another blender print to the mix that picks up on the kind of orangey coral color that's kind of become part of the palette. All right, so we got our spot graphics, we've got our patterns, and so let's start naming. So basically what I do for this process is I look back to my mood board that I developed in the first place, and I'll often have integrated a lot of keywords that can really be helpful for guiding this process. You don't have to use any of the same keywords, but it just might help set the mood. And then think about how the collection has evolved, and if anything else has kind of like come into play, any new factors or new feelings or new moods or anything like that. I noticed that when I was working on this collection, I kept kind of getting like imagery in my head, almost like I kept picturing myself like walking through, a field of tall grass and plopping myself down and reading a book of poetry. It was just maybe me craving like a kind of simpler life. I was thinking it was in the winter, I was thinking about spring, and I kept thinking about the soft morning light that pours through the window in my kitchen every morning and just kind of casts this warm glow over everything, and just that feeling that goes along with it. The feeling of whenever the birds start to sing in the spring, and just this kind of like really romantic meadows vibe. So I like to just start by like writing everything out, and kind of like revisiting it. So some of the things I wrote down were, the feeling of the fresh spring air, rebirth, the freedom to wander, meandering through soft romantic meadows, tall grass and fields of wildflowers, a warm golden sun, birds and their sweet songs. And started to kind of put that together as a story and kind of like listen to like what was kind of appearing as, maybe some collection titles. And one thing that I was talking about was poetry, so I started looking at different poets, and I was looking at Keats and ultimately settled on a poem by Sylvia Plath called Morning Song, which I felt like really related to my collection in terms of the morning glow, the sweet sound of birds, and poetry. It all kind of came together really nicely as the name of a collection, and I felt really, encapsulated that. So I decided to name my collection Morning Song. And in this process, you will have kind of started developing this narrative, and I would just recommend, just diving in. I'm not a writer, but I do like to write, and I really feel like it adds value to my artwork whenever I can kind of give the statement, and kind of helps people connect to it too. So if you go to an art show, for instance, a lot of the time, you'll look at the artwork and you might think like, wow, it's totally beautiful, and can admire it in that way, but sometimes when you read the artist statement, you can make that extra connection with it. And it tells you something about it that you didn't know and helps you kind of engage and connect with it. So it's the same kind of process with developing a story around a fabric collection or a pattern collection. So in this case, for Morning Song, the blurb that I ended up coming up with, I will read to you. Morning Song is inspired by the feeling of spring. When the earth comes back to life, the morning is lit by warm golden sun, and the birds sing their sweet morning songs. It speaks to simpler times and days spent frolicking through the fields of wildflowers and meandering through soft, romantic meadows. Each print in the collection is like a little sonnet dedicated to those charmed and beautiful landscapes. So I think it's like adding a little bit of poetry to your own kind of collection, and yeah, it just helps people connect with it. And also, the great thing about coming up with a little story behind it is that oftentimes it'll help inspire like even more ideas related to the collection. So this particular collection, Morning Song, is going to be my next fabric collection that comes out with Cloud9. And every time I do a fabric collection, I have to design a quilt. So the quilt for this collection I have named Sonnet. And we integrated some, so it's actually like little pages. You can see in the quilt design here, it's actually like little pages of poetry that are like flipped from like at different angles and really showcase the collection really beautifully. And if you turn the quilt over, you'll see that the quilting is actually done in almost like a little script font. So it kind of really picks up on the theme and like drives it even further. I think developing a great name and a great story just is like the full package, and not only will help like you connect with your artwork even more, but it will definitely help other people connect to it too. So we've got a big, beautiful collection. I hope you're really proud of all of your work, and I'd really love to see them uploaded into the project gallery.